Hello, fellow writers. I'm Lewis. That over there is Tolkien, and you have found the Scripturian Society.
Hello,
Woo!
everybody. Welcome back to your favorite podcast, all about writing, everything that we love about writing, everything that we hate about writing, love and rage, which is my two primary emotions, probably in general. So it's perfect.
It's an apt description.
Yeah, exactly. That over there is your host, Karissa Harlow, aka Lewis. I am Ash O'Rourke, aka Tolkien, for the purposes of this podcast and for the love of Karissa, my darling. Uh, Anyways, so how have you been this week?
Good.
What was up
It's been
there?
like I thought there
You
was a
just looked
moth
up
on
at the
my
ceiling.
ceiling.
Oh, much more
I don't know what it
reassuring than
was. Maybe,
ghosts or
yeah,
something.
maybe there was a moth, and then I looked back and it was gone. But I thought I saw something. Anyway, um, I have been out in public this week more than usual, which is fun because I have a cousin who graduated high school last night.
Mhm.
And so we've been having, and then her
Fun.
sister, who is also my cousin. What?
I just said fun. That's hilarious.
Oh, that you said hold on. I was like, Ash, I'm in the middle of a sentence.
No, hold on. No
Pause.
way. You're saying that your cousin's sister is also your cousin? I am blown away.
Like, do I have to explain this to you? Anyway, and then she graduated or promoted or whatever from 8th grade into high school. So we've got like back-to-back stuff. So
Oh, it's
been
exciting.
celebrating that. Yeah, it's cool.
Fun.
But yeah, so and it was kind of weird because I think I've talked about this before. I used to work at a school, right? And then I got laid off after COVID and everything. That's the school that they both graduated from and are like going to. So I went back to campus and I was like so anxious that like someone was going to recognize me or remember me and then ask me questions. Like the
That's
students, I don't think
stressful.
they know like why I left or anything. So I was like, I don't want to have to explain this to them. And then the staff knows, but I didn't want them to ask what I'd been doing because I feel like it's really unimpressive stuff. I don't know because I've been doing things, but it's not stuff that I like feel comfortable bragging about yet.
Uh-huh.
So it was just like awkward. Literally, no one talked to me except my family.
Nice.
So
Well,
it
there
was
you
fine.
go. I had the exact same
Yeah.
feeling. Somebody like Instagram now recommends friends for you. I don't know if they've always been doing that or if I just
Mhm.
now noticed, but Instagram was like, hey, do you want
Yeah.
to follow this person you used to work with at your last job? And I was like, no, I
No,
do
thank
not
you.
want them to know that I'm even on here or to know what I'm doing. And I
Yeah.
don't know why. I just I just don't
Right.
want them to. I don't know why.
Hmm.
Too much.
Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, I'm friends like on Instagram with a few people from Barnes and Noble where I worked and then the school, but not a lot. And
Yeah.
no, it's all the people that are like my age and like we're kind of on the same page. So it's not,
Mhm.
you know, I don't
Yeah.
know. It just feels weird because like at a school system, you get like 50 and 60-year-olds. And I'm like, gosh, I don't want to have to tell them that I'm doing a podcast because then I have to explain what that
Need to
is.
explain it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but anyway, it
That's
was still
funny.
fun and it was my, butt got really sore from sitting on the bleachers, but that good time.
Nice. My butt's nice and cozy right now because
Yeah.
I'm sitting on my new yoga ball chair. So that's why you won't hear any
Yeah.
creaks and pops from not only my bones, but from my chair I usually sit in. Because for some reason it makes these poppy noises when I move, and I was tired of editing them out. So they
Yeah.
say it's good for your core and hard on your lower back. I cannot speak to
Mm,
either yet. I just feel like I'm sitting on a
yeah.
bouncy ball. So this is fun for me.
Cool. I know I was when I was little and I would go over to my aunt's house, she had one. And I was like, this is such a fun toy. And I would like, bounce on it and everything. And I
Mhm.
was significantly older when I realized it was an exercise tool. So
I know. No, I was so much older than I should have been when I realized that like medicine balls are for exercise and yoga balls are for
mhm.
exercise. And I was like,
Yeah.
they're not. They're just adult toys though. But isn't that what adult toys are? Like exercise equipment is an adult toy. Isn't it kind of the
True.
equivalent?
Yeah.
I kind of feel like
I
I'm
mean,
sitting on a
I mean,
toy.
yeah. Yeah.
It's just that
It
it's so
works.
much lamer to be an adult. In our free time, we're like, we're gonna go
Yeah.
play. What are you gonna do? Well, instead of getting to go like ride bikes with friends and run wild through the streets, we're like, I'm gonna use my yoga ball, do some light stretching this
Yeah.
evening.
Exactly.
Try not to break anything.
Uh, yeah.
Yeah.
Fun
So
times.
anything else this week? You said you've been getting out a lot. Cousin
Well, I mean,
graduations and all
mostly,
that.
yeah, just for cousin stuff. Yeah. What about you?
I gave both of my dogs a bath on my lunch break today. So
Nice.
Yeah. So
Gosh.
Winchester is
Okay, so
proving himself to be a coward more and every day more than the day before. He started like
is he afraid of
whining.
water?
Well, halfway through the bath, I got him in there with treats and he didn't know what was going on. And then halfway through his little bath, all of a sudden he decides that he's very unhappy and he starts just whining at me. And I'm like, bro, like, first of all, where was this when I first started spraying water on you? And like,
We've
we're
been
definitely
here
not
for a
going to
while.
stop now. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Sorry, you were saying.
No, I was just saying that like I think there's something about second dogs in like a 2-dog household that they hate baths, because growing up we had 2 dogs and the younger one hated it significantly more than the first, and then now Luna hates it significantly more than Aurora, and Luna's the younger one, so maybe it's just something about being the second dog, they just whine more. I don't know, but
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, Brownie doesn't like it, but she takes it. She's my brave girl. But Winnie also, like, if she barks at him, he throws himself down on the ground and acts like he's been wounded. And he'll like yip
nice.
many times until I look at him and I'm like, you're fine, get up.
Aw.
Yeah. So he's also just a massive baby and very, very dramatic. But it's funny. They smelled so horrible. So now they smell good again briefly. And then they went
Good.
outside and of course, when he had to stop and pee because he's a little boy, so he pees everywhere. And then Brownie threw herself down on the ground to roll around with her still damp fur. And I was like, yep,
That seems about right.
about right. Yeah. I don't care if they're dirty. Honestly, I can't stop it. We're on a farm. I just don't want them to smell horrible. So that was an
Yeah.
endeavor. And then because I wanted everything to smell good, I was like, what if I just go full force and I vacuum all the carpets? And I also washed the dog beds and all the dog blankets. And so I did, because I'm determined to make things not smell like dog in my house. Because when we get dog houses, they'll be sleeping outside in dog houses. So
Right.
yeah, people who think it's cruel because they've only been indoor, come for me. You come live where I'm
Need an
living.
argument.
Yeah, and then you see how happy my dogs are outside. Apparently,
Yeah.
oh, there he is. There's
No.
husband who just walked in. I was just saying that apparently the other night he forgot to bring the dogs in and they were perfectly fine. Oh my God.
Are
I
those Girl
love
Scout
these.
cookies?
Yeah, he got me tag-alongs, you guys. My
Those are
husband
the
just
best
walked in and brought me
ones.
tag-alongs. And the cat just dropped like a rock from the top of the closet. There's too
So
many
tag-alongs.
animals.
I want some.
Yeah, she's like, hey, I'll take some. You don't need any more. You're already frighteningly heavy. Okay, the problem is I can't stop eating these because I have like a peanut butter and chocolate problem. Like I can't
Okay.
seem to like moderate that.
You know what the problem with tag-alongs are, and like all the Girl Scout cookies except Thin Mints? Thin Mints are packaged with like a billion cookies, and then all
Yeah.
the others have like only 15. And it's
Yeah.
misleading and unfair. There should be more tag-alongs in the box.
I agree. There's only
That's my
7
opinion.
servings, and the servings are two cookies. So that's really there's
2
2
cookies.
servings in this box, maybe.
Have you seen the Brian Regan is a comedian? Have you like seen
Yes,
anything he's
yeah.
done?
Oh my
So he
God.
has like the Fig
Flashbacks.
Newtons.
Yes.
He's like 2 cookies. Who the hell eats 2 cookies? I eat the whole box.
Impossible. Yeah. Fig Newtons are another one where you're just like, why would you only eat 2 of them?
Yeah.
What you looking at? Oh, Javi was doing the same
She's
thing
not
you were
talking to
doing,
me.
where he was like looking up and around. I was
There are
like,
moths on the
everyone
ceiling,
sees
Ash.
something that I don't see. Yeah. Anyways, but I'm trying to think of anything else in my week. Did I tell you that a snake got 2 of our chickens?
No.
I can't remember if I I
That's
told Kendall
awful.
on the other podcast, but so our listeners here are updated. Yeah, snake got 2 of our chickens. That was very sad. So that's the
Ugh.
whole story.
Hate
It's, I
snakes.
mean, we've
It's-
been
yeah.
fine since then. I went out and I tried to like plug up every remaining hole, but there's gonna always be like a few holes here and there because things shift and
Yeah.
the chickens dig and but it'll be fine because the chickens, when they're bigger, the snakes are not going to come for the chickens. They'll come for the eggs, but not the chickens. So
Right.
it's not much of a problem. And then also these guineas, which are our weird like dinosaur bird monsters, which I recently found out are essentially still wild animals because they've never been domesticated, even though we quote unquote can raise them, but like they really do whatever they're going to do in the wild. And apparently they are like the dumbest of all birds, but I would just never know. And maybe that's why they're so good at what they do, which is they're alert birds. So they make this horrible sound, but it's very loud whenever there's anything new. So it's great to have a flock of guineas around because they'll let you know something's around. And
or
like
something,
they
yeah.
kill snakes, they kill mice, they kill bugs. Like they're intense because they'll take on anything and they have no boundaries
Cool.
at all. And I think it might be due to the lack of intelligence, but you would think that they're smart. I think they behave as if they're smarter than the chickens, but it turns out apparently no. I think they were described as like the last drop in the bucket on the scale of poultry intelligence, or is that something like that on someone's blog? Credit to whoever wrote
Scale
that.
of poultry intelligence.
I thought it was very funny, but I do want to get some more of them and see if we can kind of trick them into roosting near the chicken coop, because we will not have that problem with snakes with the guineas.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Wow.
Anyways, that also
exciting.
I guess that was
excitement.
That was last week, but yeah. Anyways,
well,
and my floor's finally fixed. So those are all my updates. Hooray. Yeah.
Good. Those are good. I mean, no, the last one was a good update. The middle one was a bad one. The first one was a neutral.
Yeah, that's true. I'm all over the map. It's a mixed bag. Life is a mixed bag until I stub my toe, and then I'm like, well, everything's horrible and there's nothing to live for.
I know, right? You're like, this is it. I'm done.
This is it. I'm finished. I'm finished. I don't want anything else out of life anymore. I'm done. Yeah.
I get so angry at like physics and the reality of gravity. Like when I drop stuff, I'm like, that doesn't even make sense. There's no reason that should have fallen to the ground.
I saw a video.
You know, gravity doesn't care.
This reminds me of, I saw this video of an astronaut who was doing an interview after he got back from space, but he was so used to recording interviews with zero gravity that like he's trying to like show stuff, and so he'll just like let something go and then turn away to do something else, and then it like drops and he looks back and he's like, oh, and like would pick it up, and then it happened again with the pen, and I just thought it was the funniest thing.
I love that. He's like, why isn't it floating? It's supposed to float. And you're like, no, we have gravity here.
No, this is gravity. And he made some like comment about gravity too. Like he just looked so exasperated with it. It was very funny. Yeah.
I would love it if things could float. I don't want to float, but I wish things could.
I'd like to float.
Anyway.
That sounds like fun.
I would be too afraid I'd float away like a balloon and I'd, die.
Well, that's horrifying. Thanks for that.
Yeah.
Thanks for ruining my daydream.
Yeah. I was reading this book and it was all about dead bodies and stuff. And it was talking about how they use bodies to like simulate airplane accidents. And so I went into some detail about those. I'm like, I am never flying. Like now I am just terrified of planes. So I tend to have a horrifying perspective on things.
What? They do what with dead bodies?
They'll like look at the dead bodies to piece together what happened in airplane accidents.
Oh,
and so
okay.
Yeah.
But they now.
Like in order to have a baseline, they had to like test things like dropping bodies from large heights into water and like cadavers, not living people. But
yeah, that's not so, like that much more comforting.
Well, it's better.
Okay, see, that's what I thought you were saying at first. And then when you were like,
I'm saying both.
Oh no, they like examine the bodies after a crash. I'm like, okay, this is reasonable. And then you're like, and then sometimes they drop cadavers out of airplanes. And I was like, okay, now we're back to my original horror.
They do both. Not so much anymore. Now they have the baseline, so they're good.
That is horrifying.
I know, right?
Yep. Oh my goodness. Well, so just to move on from that as fast as I possibly can, what's our word of the week?
Our word of the week. Okay. Anecdoche.
Anecdoche.
Yes. Anecdoche. And it is a conversation wherein everyone is talking, but nobody is listening. I like that one, right?
I thought of 3 really snarky things right off the bat to say, and none of them are things I should really say on a public podcast because they're about real people who could hear this. That's funny though. No, I'll say one anyways. That sounds like a family reunion. That's my nicest one. I like it.
Yeah. It's true. It's fun.
That's funny. So you could be like, hey, man, my family reunion was just one big anecdoche.
Yes. Yeah. That's a good use.
Excellent.
I feel like you have so much experience with this. I've never had a family reunion. So
I've only been to like 2, and the first one I don't remember. That's really just me being facetious too. Like my family is pretty chill, but the last time I went to family reunion, there's just so many people and I'm just not social to begin with. And their family I just haven't seen very much in my life. So I kind of like just didn't really know what to do. And so I just end up watching. But if you end up watching large groups of people, you just kind of notice everyone's talking at each other and very few people are really listening. And it's funny. It's similar in a class of 2-year-olds. So I could also say when I taught 2-year-olds, that was a constant anecdoche because the toddlers are saying things to each other that there's no way in hell any of the other toddlers know what any of it means. They're not even listening. They're looking right through them. It's like, and this cat is purple and its name is Maggie. And then the other toddler's like, choo-choo trains go down the track. And but it's as if they're having a conversation.
They're still learning how to listen and then respond.
It's good. And you're like, let's go outside for some snacks. And they ask you some horrible question that like, how are babies made or something? And you're like, first of all, you're so young. And second of all, do not go ask your parents that.
Yeah.
That is not a school question. That's not a 2-year-old class question.
Oh gosh.
Anecdoche. Wow. I like it. Obviously, I'm really enjoying this word.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a good word.
Nice.
Yeah, cool. I feel like this is a very common situation, like you were saying, in family situations, because like you can't talk to people on an intimate level. Yeah. So I feel like large groups, any large group, like you're saying, could be one.
Yeah, that's true.
But I assume arguments sometimes end up that way too, though, even if they're
very much so, because you're only trying to like think about like your next comeback. You're not actually listening to what the other person's saying. Right. Yeah, arguments, large groups. I think when you get like high-powered individuals together, I think that they tend to do that because they think that their ideas are superior, so they're not really interested in listening to other people anyways. I think that is often the perfect recipe for an anecdoche. So
I love how naturally that came out of your mouth. I think it's the perfect recipe for an anecdoche. And so
and I know big words because I'm one of those extremely superior high-powered individuals. Take away the word high-powered and then add the word delusionally before the word superior.
To say, if you know what the word anecdoche means, you can feel superior to other people and therefore
you can therefore engage in it and never have to listen again.
A justified anecdoche, if you know what the word means.
Yeah, it's a good thing that we're just a writing podcast and not a self-help podcast.
Yeah, this is bad advice, but also it's great advice if you're
delightful.
A writer. I don't know. Anyway.
On that note, do you have any book recs for this week?
Yeah, so I read Poison Study. Have you heard of this? Is it Marie V. Snyder? I keep forgetting her name. There's something about, she has names that are very similar to many names. I think it's Maria V. Snyder.
Ooh,
I like Poison the name. Study. It's very cool. It's a fantasy and it's about this girl who is about to be executed in her kingdom, but she's the next prisoner in line for execution. Gets to be the next poison tester for the king if they choose to take it. And so she's like, yep, I would prefer to live and potentially die of poison than get executed right now. And so like there's all this political intrigue and magic and like there's a romantic subplot and it's very interesting. Like the leader of the nation or whatever, it's like a kingdom that has been taken over by like what is it called when the military is in charge? There's a word for it. It's not oligarchy, but it's kind of like that. And so like the guy's a commander, not a king. And he's like, so many of his opinions, I'm like, these are great ideas. I wish governments operated like this. And then some of his ideas, I'm like, wow, that's terrible. And so it's just like this really awesome mix of good and bad. And so it was very good. I love it.
I like it.
I ordered the next 2 books.
Oh God, that's the best when you find a series where you're like, I have to. I wanted to do that with Illuminae really, really badly. Like they're still in my thrift books cart because I was like, I have to buy so many other books. I can't justify this, but I want them. So like they're next on my list to buy these 2 new ones. But anyways, when you first started describing this book, I was like, first I was like, hooray, poison. Then I was like, oh no, it sounds similar to a book I'm working on. Like, that kind of like fear. So I was just listening very intensely. There was no anecdoche here at all. I was like, give me the details, Karissa. Do I have to scrap this book that I'm working really hard on? That I think I have finally broken through and found all the key to? No, I think we're different enough. I think it's good. But thanks for the heart attack.
You're welcome. I think you told me about your idea and it's very different. I don't know if I'm doing a bad job of describing it or if everything sounds similar when you preface it as fantasy, but
no, it's mostly because the poison role type thing, but mine is like from a different angle. So I think we're perfectly fine.
Yep. I just think it's so cool because I think this book came out in 2005. It's relatively old and it's so unique from, I think, anything else that was around at the time. So
I love that.
I
How
love it.
exciting. That's good.
Yeah.
Huh.
What have you read this week? Good or bad?
So over on That Pretentious Book Club, we did Fahrenheit 451.
Yeah.
And I have read this book 3 times. I think I mentioned it last episode too, but I'm just saying, like, I've read this book 3 times in my life. Like when I was a kid, I read it, and like around high school, college, I read it. And obviously I just read it again for the other pod, for our sister podcast. And I've had such a very different reaction every time, but always loved it. But my reaction this time was so different because even like the last time I read it, like in college, the technology that we had in our real world every day then wasn't as similar as it is now to the technology in Fahrenheit 451. There is stuff that is straight out of that book. And so many of the ways that society is like devolving right now has already like, it's not to the extent that it is in Fahrenheit 451, but you could so easily see it. If we were to continue devolving, we would end up exactly where it is in Fahrenheit 451. So I had the most like, oh my God. And it's
terror, like this is my life.
But so good. And God, it's just so full of amazing quotes. And guys, go read it. It's short. I think I said that last time, but like really go read it and like get a pen and like underline quotes and take notes. Cause like there's just so much to think about. It's just like so hearty as far as like thought material. So good. Like I feel like I have so many like I could start conversations on things that I've already been thinking about our society and draw it all back to Fahrenheit 451 and vice versa. And I just feel like I have so much like good material. It very much clarified a lot of the things that our society is going through right now, which is just always interesting. So especially right now, it's just very timely. So I think it's a good read for everybody. Yeah.
It is really cool to read some of the older dystopias. So like Fahrenheit 451, 1984, Brave New World, all that. Like how, as an author, if you just study basic human nature, you can almost predict how society will crumble. Yeah. And so it seems like, you know, you're like prophesying later, but it's really just human nature study. What?
Yes, I'm so sorry. And I was listening. You were saying prophesying human nature study. And I completely agree about dystopians, especially classics, especially Fahrenheit 451, which is a sci-fi dystopian. And actually Ray Bradbury's only science fiction book, which is actually funny because he thought it was a science fiction author. I was laughing because my husband is playing video games right next to me. And he burped, and I'm sure the mic picked it up, and I will edit it out. And apologies if I somehow miss it, but I did have to mark the time code to go back and edit it out. And then he like looked at me like he was sorry. And then he blew me a kiss. And so I was like, I don't know how to respond to any of this. So he distracted me from your excellent point, but I completely concur.
Yeah. It's right. So I also read this week Stiff by Mary Roach, which I think I mentioned before because I started a while ago and I just finished it. And I don't know what it was about this point, but there was a point when I was reading it and she was talking about how so it's all about cadavers and like what happens to us after we die and like the uses we
so much cadaver talk from you today, Karissa.
Because I read a book about it, Ash. And so apparently they like when they're testing guns and weapons and stuff for like war scenarios, they'll use cadavers to see like what'll happen. And so they used to also design or use animals that are similar to humans anatomically, and they used to use cows. And so like very sarcastically and very ironically, she made this point about how the US military to this day is prepared for a cow uprising. And I just burst into laughter so hard that I started crying. It was so funny. Just the way she phrased it. And she's like, apparently cows used to be called beeves, like Beeves. And so she's like, she used this word beeves. And then she followed it up with saying, which must have confused the 5 people that have read this book since beeves means cows or something like that. So this paragraph, I was already on the brink of laughter. And then it ended with the military being prepared for cow uprisings. And I was like, I'm done. I sat there for a good 40 seconds laughing silently until it finally came out of me. I tried to read on. I'm like, nope, I got to take a break to laugh. So that was a really fun scenario. I haven't laughed in a while.
I want to clarify this since Javi just walked in his army uniform. Hey, Javi, do you feel like the US military is prepared to defend us in the case of a cow uprising?
A cow?
Yes, a bovine uprising. He feels like, no. It's like,
Wow,
we're not
Javi.
there.
You need
Wow.
to study your cow ammunition.
Overtake the country.
He said the bovine would overtake the country.
Well, we better treat them better than we're treating them now then.
Ooh, that is a good point. Ooh, grass-fed only, everybody. Go for
Mhm.
grass-fed only. Anyways, because then they live happy lives. That's another one of my farm talks, but I try not to go off on those all the time. Oh,
Everything
man.
just leads there.
Everything leads back to farm talk for me.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. What was I gonna say?
Book
I totally lost
recommendations.
my-
Book
oh, yeah.
Wine Uprising. I don't know.
Uprising.
Summing up the last 5 minutes.
Oh yeah, all of those good things. I think that's all I got. So should we get into the theme for this episode?
Yes, we are going to be talking about the miscommunication trope. I'm trying to think
Hell
another way
yeah.
to phrase that, but
No, that's
just what it's
clear.
called.
I don't even remember what the context was. I was just thinking about this trope yesterday and I got so mad because I hate this trope so much. Do you want to give us a little definition of what this is if someone's not familiar? Although I feel like probably everyone is getting mad also because surely nobody likes this.
I know it's I feel like it's a really unlikable trope. I've seen on TikTok a couple people like it, but generally I don't think people do. It's when
Who likes this?
Yeah. So, and I can talk about that a little bit. I also hate it, but I understand the other side, which is rare for me. Just I'm only half kidding. So miscommunication trope is when you have some characters in a book and for, I don't know, essentially plot purposes, they just never talk about things that are bothering them. And so it blows. It typically happens in romances. So you're like, I like him, but he's flirting with this girl. And so you just like, she never talks to him. And it's like, that's his sister. And then there's just confusion and stuff because of miscommunication. So I think it can be very annoying for readers because I don't know. It's debatable, but I don't think you should put in plot points that could be solved by a 2-minute conversation.
Yes.
Because when you drag them out like that, it becomes really unsatisfying when you finally get to the reveal in the conversation. You're like, wow, we could have solved this 10 pages earlier, 10 pages, 100 pages earlier, and we didn't. So
it feels cheap. It feels cheap and it feels disrespectful to your audience's intelligence. I have such a problem with this because I also feel like, I don't know, it's like gratuitous drama for the point of drama. And because I don't enjoy that in real life, I'm like, why don't you just have a discussion? And if it's like a really hard discussion or there's like some like deep trauma, I can see avoiding like a tough conversation for a little while. But most of the times you have the miscommunication trope. I want to say that's not the case and it's not justifiable to keep avoiding it. It's like when someone's like, yeah, I just really like this person, but I haven't gotten up the guts to tell them. I'm like, okay, well, either just do it or just let it go. Yeah, which is kind of mean, but like not just about that, but like if it's a tiny thing that can be solved, I'm like, just do it. And they're like, it's hard. And I'm like, yeah, it is. It's also hard to feel that way.
Yeah, it's the disproportionate nature. It's like, okay, so let's say that someone has a crush on another character and they are just going on constantly in their inner monologue about, oh, does he like me? I'm so upset. Everything sucks. Everything is going wrong for me. Why doesn't he talk to me? That's very different than saying, I kind of have a crush on him, but I also have all these other things that are really important. And this is kind of a tangential thing. And we'll get to that when I'm ready. But right now I'm focused on these things. So it's very different.
I totally agree. It's not like, and this also is a thing that I don't want to go off on a tangent on it either, but I don't want to like seem like I'm saying just because you like someone, you should tell them. Because I think unless you actually want to date them or can be with them and they're available, I think don't. That's a you problem. So like in Oregon, I noticed, I don't know if it was just like my group or whatever, but there was this like, it was normal for like, if you liked someone, you should get up the guts to tell them, even if you didn't want to date them, which I just don't understand why you wouldn't want to date someone if you quote unquote like them like that. I also don't feel like what are they supposed to do with that information?
Right.
Like, hey, I like you. Okay. And I just don't really, it's very strange to me. So I'm not saying do that.
But it's kind of a self-centered thing to do. Like they need to know that I like them, but I don't want to do anything about it. It's like, then why do they need to know? Yeah, it's not their life doesn't revolve around you.
No, it doesn't. I think the reason I don't like it is the same reason that I don't like the miscommunication trope. And it's because like you said, like if it is something, I think in most cases, the miscommunication trope is misused when it's instead of it being a solution to an all-consuming problem that someone is dealing with, it's used even when the issue is tangential, like you said. And if that's the case, it's not necessary. Like if the whole crux of the story like hinges upon this miscommunication, and you can justify the reason that they would like draw out not talking about it, you can really justify it, then it's not even a big do you need it at all, might be my question.
Well, the miscommunication trope really is about pacing a lot of times. So if you're going to do, and I think it's also about genre. So like this always really bugs me, and this is just a romantic subplot issue that I have. So if you're in a dystopia or a sci-fi or a fantasy where there are really high stakes going on, the main goal and like the main storyline shouldn't be revolving around a romance. And I mean, they should be, if they're trying to save the world, then that really should be their focus. And if you're focusing too much on this miscommunication trope with a romance, you're distracting from your main plot. And that's really annoying. But in a contemporary romance where the romance is the point of the story, the miscommunication can serve a purpose. But you have to like be proportionate in how big is this issue and how long is it going on for. So like if you're writing a contemporary romance and there's a miscommunication up front, and then a couple days later, which might translate to like a couple chapters later, it's solved, that's fine. That can totally work. The problem is if early on you bring this up and then it's still going on by the end of the book and it somehow plays into the climax or something that's really important, and you're like, this isn't proportional. There needs to be a sense that it has to match the theme of your book and how much time you would realistically spend on it. So.
I agree. I got myself distracted. Great. What was I gonna say? I was gonna say something about miscommunication.
Really, the theme of this episode? You're gonna say something about that?
Shocker. I was gonna actually say something that was on topic. Oh yeah, I was gonna say, I think perhaps the biggest qualifier for whether you should or shouldn't use the miscommunication trope is, could the people involved in the miscommunication, could two reasonably intelligent people either not have that communication or solve that communication pretty much immediately or with very little effort? If your answer is don't do the miscommunication trope. Because what it often feels like, it's like the characters are being intentionally obtuse, like they're being dumb on purpose, is what
in an unrealistic way.
Yeah, and that's what it feels like. That's what almost every time with a miscommunication trope. It kind of in this realm is so Tiger's Curse, love it. But the whole overarching conflict for the entire series is essentially a miscommunication trope. And it's worse than a lot of other times because he's being very clear. He is not miscommunicating. She's being misinterpreting. Stupid. She's being a dum-dum when she has absolutely no reason at all to be a dum-dum. Like here's the miscommunication. He says, I love you. I want to be with you. She says, well, he's just saying that because he doesn't know what else is out there. And I'm not good enough for him. All right. And that's the conflict for the whole series. This is a YA adventure fantasy Indian mythology. Why the hell is that the main conflict for the whole series? I get it that like the romantic,
it's the proportional issue.
Yeah, it's the proportional issue. Like that could have been a problem for like 3/4 even of the first book, but it shouldn't have been something that was left unresolved at the end of the first book. And it definitely shouldn't be carrying through the entire series, but it's such a big problem that it motivates her to make the dumbest decisions in every book, to the point where you as the reader are going, you are an absolute idiot. I can't even like be in favor of the main character anymore. And I loved these books when I was in high school. And then I read them again in college, and she's like a college age person. And I was like, she's an idiot. She's so stupid.
Yeah.
That's what the
never happened
trope feels like. If it is not a reasonable miscommunication, wrap it up quickly. Like wrap it up. Yeah, we're all paranoid, and so we all miscommunicate and interpret things incorrectly, but like wrap it up. Don't drag it out. God, please don't drag it out past your first book.
I totally agree. I have a couple points. Which one should I go with first? Okay, so this is the TikTok argument that people were making that they liked it, is that it is realistic to have people miscommunicating. This is technically true for the most part. People miscommunicate all the time when they're, having anecdoche problems. Anecdoche, did I pronounce it wrong?
Anecdoche.
The word of the week, anecdoche. Anecdoche. They're having anecdoche problems. People
I like
miscommunicate.
Anecdoche. I'm gonna
That's
use
what I
that.
originally thought it was, which is why it came out just now. But so it is realistic to experience situations where people are either not talking or they're talking and no one's listening. That is very realistic. I think the problem is because it's a book, it's very easy and even usually desired to amplify issues. And so when you amplify a miscommunication, it just becomes more annoying than when you amplify like a political issue or a government issue, or I don't know, that's the thing that's on my mind right now, I guess. But it's reasonable almost to amplify those to make a point. It never feels reasonable to amplify a miscommunication.
No.
Because then it delves into like, this person is stupid, not this person is reasonably upset.
Yeah.
And so I get the realism thing. And like I said, if you make it proportional and you solve it in a way that makes sense for the plot and the direction of the story, I think it can work. Yeah. I will say I still don't tend to enjoy it most of the time, but if it's a small factor of the story, then people who don't enjoy it can still enjoy the story. Yeah. And people that do enjoy it can still enjoy the story. And so it's kind of a perfect world.
Yeah, I agree. I think your human characters should be the most relatable part of your story. If you are setting your world building, your magic system, your plot, your whatever is completely unrelated to reality, not relatable at all, that's perfectly fine. But your people should be relatable enough. That's why you can't make the miscommunication thing bigger. You can make everything else bigger, but not the miscommunication problem, because then it's like, oh, so it makes them seem like cartoons of characters, not like actual people. And the goal is to make them feel like it could be you, in the story. Yeah. And hopefully you're not that stupid. So essentially, if you wouldn't fall for the miscommunication, don't make your characters fall for it. If you'd fall for it for a second and then figure it out, or fall for it, but then be like, I'm done with this. I want to clarify it and do something about it. Perfectly fine. But otherwise, it's going to make your character seem, well, one of two things, either stupid or like they're just addicted to drama. And typically for a protagonist, that's neither one of those things or things that you want. Maybe in like a subplot that can be happening with some like background characters, but your protagonist should not be stupid. And I mean, I guess you could make them drama obsessed, but it's going to be hard for your readers to support that protagonist.
It's going to really depend on the reader at that point. You're going to divide people. So, so I think another reason that authors use this might not be true because I don't read a lot of adult books necessarily, but I do think it's a thing that tends to happen in YA more than other genres, even more than middle grade or NA. I see it a lot in YA. And I think it's because adults kind of look on teenagers as over dramatizing things and being insecure in this stuff. Is this true? Oftentimes it is. Teenagers are in a very emotional time in their life, but they're also they're reasonable people. Like, this is the situation that always comes to mind when I think of miscommunication tropes. And I can't think of a specific book, but I feel like this happens a lot where the girl likes the guy and they have this conversation. She's like, man, I think I like him and I think he likes me. And then she sees him out like in normal daylight hours with another girl. And she just assumes, oh, that's his girlfriend. Yeah. Like, as though he couldn't have friends who are girls, as though he couldn't have sisters or cousins or relatives of some kinds. And it's so easy at that point, if you want to date this person, to go up to them and say, hey, is that your girlfriend? Like, like, can I meet her? Like, if you're friends and this person, just ask like a basic question. And then he can be like, oh no, it's my sister. You can still meet her, like come over and say hi or whatever. Yeah. But it's always blown into this big thing of like, oh, he has a girlfriend, I have to back off. If you know someone has a girlfriend, you should back off that way. But if you don't know who it is, it's totally reasonable to ask as a human being. You don't even have to like them.
Yeah. Like, oh, hey, is that your girlfriend? No, it's my sister. Or if they're really shifty, maybe it is, and he's hiding it. But like give some indication of it. I was thinking like one of the most famous instances of a miscommunication trope, but done correctly, Pride and Prejudice but the thing is, you have to remember, this is the reason it's good, is the tension, the conflict, because the main plot is about Elizabeth and Mr. Darcy falling in love, right? But not really being able to admit it. And, Pride and Prejudice and all of that. So the thing that they did right, and the problem with everything else, it seems like that has tried to do this, is the miscommunication that happens between them is when basically she thinks that he has convinced Bingley not to marry the sister, and he kind of has, but she kind of reads like some other stuff into it that didn't happen, and then she finds out that actually he's like been trying to like help and all of this stuff. But the thing is, that's not all there is. They already had big conflict, which was the pride versus prejudice in each of them.
Yes.
Like they were already having big type conflict that would be like they can't even talk to each other because they're on just completely different planes. And then we added in a little miscommunication trope that got resolved in a few more chapters. So that is fine as like a supporting thing, especially if you have characters who are supposed to be really different or in conflict. Of course, there's going to be miscommunication. But like Karissa said, don't just do the miscommunication. It has to be in addition to more substantial conflict and also resolved. And their miscommunication was very reasonable because communication was very limited back then. Like she couldn't just like pick up the phone and call him and clarify. Like she had to like be in maybe the same place as him or write him a letter. But honestly, it got solved before that could have happened anyways. But even that, like the situation was very reasonable. It's very believable that there'd be that specific miscommunication. It wasn't just about a miscommunication of feelings either. It was a miscommunication of events, which I think is more believable. And
that's true.
Yeah. And then it got solved still really quickly. I feel like that's the best I've ever seen a miscommunication trope done. And because I don't like the trope, if it's not done to that standard, it's going to be hard for me to be cool with it.
Yeah, fair. And I think you touched on another point. It's really hard to do miscommunication tropes well nowadays because there is so much technology available to communicate with people.
Yeah.
So like back in Pride and Prejudice days, miscommunication was probably more reasonable because you couldn't just pick up the phone and talk to someone. You had to write a letter, and letters don't show tone of voice, and you can't have a conversation where they can ask questions, that kind of stuff. Nowadays with technology, is there still miscommunication? Of course, people misinterpret texts, people say things but don't listen and all of that. But it's really more a factor of the person at that point and their inability to communicate or their lack of desire to communicate or their desire for drama. Whereas in Pride and Prejudice, you're right, it's the events that were misinterpreted. And so that's a good point. Make it the event. Not the person.
I think personal miscommunication should never be a primary. It just should never be a primary plot point ever. And it shouldn't take up a lot of space. A situational miscommunication could take up more space. It could even be a plot point, like an actual tangible one, depending on like, as long as the consequences of that miscommunication are like their actual tangible stakes.
And I think too, like kind of on my teenager point, teenagers are often very insecure. And so like you were saying about Tiger's Curse, that, you know, this character says like, I love you, I want to be with you. And she's like, I don't believe you. I'm going to choose to misinterpret this. And I do think, again, is that something that teenagers do? Sure, that's a thing everyone does at certain points. But even at that point, on that level, if you're writing it correctly or whatever, that's the issue, not the miscommunication. The miscommunication is kind of the thing that is revealing the conflict. But the conflict itself is that this person is insecure and doesn't feel like someone could want them. So even that is a little different. And you could write that well, where it's a factor of, you know, they're not going back and forth where she's like, yeah, I want to be with you. And then she's like, but he doesn't like me. So I'm going to break up with him and then get back together and then break up. It's more a factor of this person has to realize that she's valuable. And that is very different than a miscommunication conflict.
And it's
deeper than that.
Exactly. And the problem with that too was like that miscommunication didn't stem from a character flaw. If it had stemmed from a character flaw, I would get it. It's different. But instead, insecurity doesn't appear to be something that she's struggling with throughout the rest of the series. It's only with the one character who is doing everything in his power to prove to her that he loves her. In every other situation, she's totally confident, totally self-assured. She doesn't have an insecurity problem, like maybe a teeny tiny bit, like every person does, but like it's not like a big problem. So if she was insecure in every other situation with every other person, I could also buy it. I'd be like, okay, girl needs to be in therapy. She's a big problem. Instead, it's just like, it's like she's choosing to be stupid. And that's the thing with the miscommunication. Unless you can justify it, it's like your character is choosing to be stupid. And it's so hard to be in favor and support a protagonist that is choosing to be an idiot. You're like, why are you, this is senseless drama now. Senseless.
And then I get to a point where like, it all comes out and the other characters are like, oh, we understand. And I'm like, you what? Now I'm frustrated with all of you for being accepting of this, right? Like if I liked them before, now I'm like, now you're being stupid. This was not a reasonable thing. They're always like, I understand why you would have thought that. I'm like, I don't. And I've been in her head this whole time.
No, yeah, it's even worse when it's from first person because you're like, yeah, I'm right there with you. And I just don't know how you drew that conclusion at all. So,
right. But yeah, if you take if the miscommunication trope is just a factor of like a personality trait or a situation where like in Pride and Prejudice, it plays into things, but it's not the main driver. Or if there's a character who is very insecure in all these different ways. And so miscommunication is just something she ends up doing accidentally because of that. That's different than like the miscommunication trope itself being the conflict. Yeah. So I think if you like the miscommunication trope, which apparently some people do, I did not know that was a thing, although people write about it, so clearly some people do.
Who out there is enjoying this?
I know.
I don't want to be judgy if you guys are enjoying it, but I do want someone to explain to me why and under what qualifications. Because like I said, I like it in Pride and Prejudice. But I've pretty much disliked it every other time I've seen it. So I'm either reading the wrong books and you guys can point me in the right direction, or I really need my horizons broadened because I do not see the appeal at all.
But yeah, I just think the key to doing it well is to take it situational as opposed to like personal feeling wise, and to use it as a factor of a conflict or a personality as opposed to the entirety of it, right? Because that's another problem with the miscommunication trope is, especially when it's in a romance, it becomes the character, usually the girl's whole personality. It's just like everything in her is like, I want to be with this guy, but I don't want to talk to him, and I'm miscommunicating all this stuff. And it's like, what else is there to you? Please tell me more.
Yeah,
like,
please.
I don't care about
else?
this.
Hallmark movies do this too all the time. It's the miscommunication trope that even if you can justify the moment of misunderstanding, you're like, why are you choosing to not solve it quickly? Right. It's why is this your whole world now?
Yeah. And if it's a factor of insecurity, if it's a factor of something else, then it will make sense. It will fit in with the character. I'm just going to repeat this over and over until it sinks in. Because it can be a factor, but it can't be the whole thing. I think that's, I was also going to say, do you think, because we've been talking about romances a lot, I feel like there's a lot of miscommunication trope in parent-child relationships too, especially in YA, where like, especially in fantasy, where like the parent is like, yes, you're magical, but I never told you. And, you know, then the kid is angry and they won't have a conversation with, and this is always really frustrating, is when the kid spends the entire book being like, why wouldn't my mom have told me this? I'm so mad. And then the mom is there and she's like, let me explain. And the kid is like, no, I'm done with you. I'm like, I'm sorry, what? We've just spent this whole book with your frustration and you could solve it right now. But that now you say no. Yeah. So I guess I view that as miscommunication trope.
I think the miscommunication trope is actually a lot more genuine and doable with parent-child relationships, because parents and children historically and for the rest of time will always misunderstand each other. Like probably more miscommunication happens in that relationship than any other relationship. However, it's like you said, I have no problem with using that. I don't even have a problem with being like, why wouldn't my parent tell me I have magical powers? That's fine. And if the parents are dead, then like that can be an ongoing thing that they wrestle with. But if the parent is alive and well and in communication with them and not hiding anything or willing to explain, let them have the damn conversation.
Exactly.
If the parent's like, wait, let me tell you, let them tell the character. Let them. Because I can't even think of it like as a teenager, if I was mad and I wanted a why answer, why on earth would I then turn away from it?
Exactly.
You can still be mad and get the answer. They could still get the answer and think it's still not a good enough reason. Don't worry. Your character can still be mad. But like, why would it just doesn't make any sense. But I do think that I think you can probably pull off miscommunication way better more often between parents and child than between like lovers. I feel like those miscommunications tend to be so like cheap and fast and kind of dumb. But yeah, I mean, it's like with anything though, like if the miscommunication could be solved with something that's already in the story, like a parent offering the actual answer and or like just a very simple conversation between characters that are already on a comfort level enough that they could have the conversation, then don't have the miscommunication. Like, I don't think you need it. Like it serves
Right.
no purpose. Even if you solve it right away, why bother? What a waste of space. I
Mhm.
believe in conciseness. I think that concise stories have the most impact. This is
Mhm.
not new. If you've been here for a while, I'm
This is
not the only one
Ash's
who
thing.
thinks this, but I do stand by this idea that if you don't need it in your story, take it out. And as somebody who writes fantasy, I know that's very hard. And I end up cutting lots and lots of stuff out of my books all the time. And there's always more that I could cut probably. But like, just be careful. This is one of those things where I think miscommunication is also used as like filler. You don't
Mhm.
need it. Like if you
Well,
cannot fully justify it, don't
yes.
include it at all. It's just filler.
I think it's also used as a postponement technique. So the author's like,
Mhm.
well, they can't know this till book 3. So I'll just have a miscommunication going on for book 2. And it's like, no, put the parent or the boyfriend out of commission for a while for some
Yeah.
legitimate reason, or
Yes.
make it a deeper issue, or, do
Yeah.
something that is an actual
Yeah.
legitimate possibility instead
Mhm.
of just having them refuse to communicate when they clearly want answers.
Yeah. Either
Um,
install an
yeah.
actual barrier to effective
Mhm.
communication or take it out entirely and put something else in. Add a new subplot, add another character, add another scene. But if
Yeah.
you cannot actually justify why the miscommunication couldn't be fixed, like with an actual obstacle, then don't do it. But yeah, like Karissa said, sometimes it's as easy as saying, this person's been kidnapped, this
Right.
person's dead, this person's missing, this
Mhm.
person has lost their ability to speak. What
Yeah.
this
Lost their
person's lost their
memory.
memory. That's it.
Yeah.
I see. I don't like it with main characters, but I'll take it with background characters,
Right.
with supporting characters. So if that's the case, let it happen.
Yep. I think another difference, I don't know. Again, I don't really like it normally, but I think a difference is when the miscommunication is happening, is the character assuming an answer or are they just afraid to ask the question? So, like, if you
Oh,
have a character who says, okay, I think this guy likes me, but it looks like he has a girlfriend. If her response is, oh no, does he have a girlfriend? What does he think about me? What do I do? I can't ask him. I have to just like mull this over for forever for no apparent reason. That's not the same thing as her saying, oh, well, like maybe it's his sister, maybe it's something else. I'm just going to continue on as if
mm-hmm.
this didn't happen. I'm going to see where things go, which is a
Yeah.
very like rational way to handle something like
Yes.
that. If you're not willing to ask the question, then you shouldn't be jumping to conclusions in that sense. Again, do people do this in real life? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
But be like, teenagers are not dumb. They're not, only emotion. They do have logic and they can say to themselves, I can get by in my life not knowing the answer to this. I don't have to
Yeah.
assume. I don't have to be a jerk to this person because I'm assuming an answer. I
Yeah.
can just say, it's possible he has a girlfriend. I should tread carefully because of that.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to be a jerk about it or
Yeah.
assume things.
In the book
So I
I'm
think that's
reading
also
right
a
now,
difference.
actually, it's that exact scenario. There's this guy,
Mm-hmm.
this girl is like weirdly obsessed with. I think that they have a past life connection, but I haven't gotten to that point yet. But I'm pretty sure
Okay.
that that's what it is. And so, but because her character is not, she doesn't know this dude at all. She's just immediately like feels like she knows him, but she doesn't actually. And he's very standoffish and basically has said to stay away from him. He's like a total jerk. I also like, I don't really get this because I like the nice, not the nice guy. He's still a bad boy, but the friendly bad boy. I like
Yeah.
him. This other
Right.
guy is just like, yeah. Anyways, that's a totally different thing. But
I think I know
but
what
they
book you're reading. Anyway, go on.
which one?
Is it Fallen?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you really just get that from
I did.
context?
I
Fallen
did.
by Lauren Kate. It was a listener recommendation. Oh my God.
I totally know. Anyway,
That's
go on.
hilarious. Oh my God. Well, at the moment, now you totally know the plot I'm giving you.
Mhm.
So at the moment, the main character, Lucy, she thinks that this guy, there's these two girls that keep talking to him and act like they really know him. And so she's
Mhm.
kind of in the back of her mind. It kind of bothers her also because they're horrible people. These girls are like
Right.
kind of bitchy, honestly. Like
Mhm.
they're not nice. I have other
Right.
words for them, but I won't, it's rude. So I won't use them, but they're awful. And
Yeah.
she's just like, why is this guy talking to them? Like, is one of them his girlfriend? Like, because they act like really familiar. And
Mhm.
because of the setting that she's in and the fact that she doesn't know him and he's been very standoffish and they're jerks, like
Mhm.
she can't really ask any of them because that would be humiliating. Like she has
Right.
actual tangible reasons to not be able to ask, but it's also
Mhm.
not all consuming. It bugs her when it pops up, like when she sees them like all talking together. But then when they're not there, she's not thinking about it all that much.
Right.
So I feel like that's very reasonable because
It's
in this
not all
scenario,
consuming.
yeah, it's not all consuming. So it's not like a main plot point. And she has the fact of not knowing the dude at all and having no right to ask because
Right.
they're not dating. And at this
Exactly.
point in the book, they've spoken like 2 words to each other. So yeah, it's not really her place to ask. So that makes
Yeah.
sense. That
Right.
I mean, I'm sure they're not his girlfriends. So I feel very
We'll see.
sure about that.
I know the answer.
I
Anyway,
think they might be angels.
Oh, okay.
I don't
Interesting
know.
guess.
This is my current hypothesis. I'll fill you guys in next week because
Yeah.
I'm sure I'll list it for my book rec.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think another problem with the miscommunication trope is that sometimes the character will focus in on the thing that is not the issue instead of the thing that is. So like in that situation you just described where there's this guy and he has these, girls that he's talking to and they're jerks. I feel like as a person, you should be more upset that they treat you badly than, oh, is one of them his girlfriend?
Yes.
Right. So it's like, if you were to say, because sometimes they have confrontations in these situations, they're like, oh, you're jealous, or you just want to talk to him. And it's like, no, you're a jerk to me. I would like you to leave me alone. I want to understand why you are bothering me.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
So it's like,
and
in
it's
that situation, it doesn't have to be about the romance. It can be about being mistreated as a human being and that not being
really
okay.
more is because if they were nice to her, then she wouldn't mind so much. It's just like on top of the fact that they're horrible people, like also he's friends with them or girlfriends with, like, it's just like fuel to the fire, but they're already horrible. She already just detests them, understandably. So I think that this is I guess this is an example of the miscommunication trope, but I didn't even identify it because I think it was, valid. And typically if I call it out as a miscommunication trope, I'm probably dissing it because probably I don't like them.
Yeah. But yeah, so I just feel like if you're gonna have that miscommunication trope, don't like highlight the part of the issue that is not really the issue. Make it reasonable. So
I agree.
Just it always frustrates me, side note, when there are characters in books and one of the characters that is like a likable character is legitimate friends with a jerk character. And then the main character is like, this person like is actively bullying me. Why are you friends with them? And they're just like, oh, you don't know them that well. That always really bothers me. Like, you should not be friends with people that are awful to other people. Looking at a person's friend group is a really good way to tell what kind of person they are.
That's true.
And that should matter. And I like, there's a difference between being nice and friendly to someone that's kind of a jerk because you want to be kind to them versus being their best friend. So
yes, there's very much a difference. Yeah, that's a whole way. We can talk about character consistency in another episode, but I totally agree. Is there anything else you want to say about the miscommunication trope?
I don't think so. Are you good?
No, I'm good. Good. Tell me about your writing updates.
Writing, yay! I actually have one. So I'm working on my criminal found family fantasy work that I have.
God, I love everything about the concept.
I know. And so I think, again, I have said this before, I got like probably 2/3 of the way through. And then I took a break because the puppies were here and I was taking care of them and all that kind of stuff. And I needed to read to catch up on my Goodreads goal because that's what matters to me. And so it has been a good probably month since I've worked on it. So now I'm going through and rereading everything from page 1 to reacquaint myself with everything. So that's kind of where I am. And I've been taking stuff out and editing things that kind of occur to me. I'm not doing like a hard edit, but just as things come up. But side note, I'm very grateful to past Karissa because she took notes on where things were supposed to go. And sometimes you should definitely do, like, if you're going to take even like a day break, just write out all your ideas first, because it's very possible you won't come back for a month and you will have forgotten everything. So I'm reading through it and I'm like, oh, thank goodness I wrote this down. I knew I had a direction I was going with this, but I totally forgot until I read it.
I try to never leave off without putting I always put like 3 asterisks and then I put, and next this happens, even if it's just like a tiny little thing, because it'll get me rolling at least. Yeah.
To just remember where I saw this going, because otherwise I would be completely lost. And I think I have a really good direction for it to go. I'm really excited to write the ending. It's not like I hit writer's block or anything. It was just like a life situation. So I'm glad that I kept those ideas and I know where it's going. And so I'm just like correcting a few inconsistencies. When you write your first chapter, you don't necessarily know all the details sometimes. So now that I know them, I'm like, okay, this isn't what happened. It needs to be this. And so I'm just reading through it, and it's very fun, and I'm really proud of it, and I like it. So we'll see.
Huh. I like it. That's exciting.
Yeah.
All that's super exciting. Hooray for writing
Yeah.
updates. I
Yeah.
actually have some too for once. It's been a while since we both
Yay.
actually had them because
I
either
know.
I don't have them or you don't have them. But basically, I remember how like this was probably like 10 episodes ago. I was like, I'm gonna not work on the project that I've edited to death. Okay, I would like to point out it's been probably like 2 years since I've given up on it, but I had previously edited it to death because when I was querying it, I got some pretty positive responses. And so, not, of course, nobody actually bit the hook because that's always what happens. But anyway, so then I obsessed over it for years and was like, oh my God, how can I make it perfect so that people want it? And then I got so close, I couldn't see the forest for the trees. And I might have already said this before in like one of our last episode or something. But basically, my challenge has been, because I keep wanting to be like, okay, I'm just going to sit down, dive in and write, and just fix it. Except that I couldn't, because I actually needed to do like an actual brainstorming process, which is probably the hardest for me because I get carried away and I just want to start writing. And then I hit a wall because, like always, the problem was farther back and I didn't see it yet.
Yeah.
I didn't plan anything. So anyway, so I've been like thinking over it for like a week, like a straight week of being like, okay, like every spare minute I've been like thinking about the story and what does it need. And honestly, if we're not for this podcast, I would not know what to do. Honestly, just like talking to you about writing every week gives me so many ideas and so much insight into what I'm doing.
Yeah.
But we did an episode where you had a lot to say in it about basically like your conflict, like for your story versus your overarching conflict for the whole series, like for one book versus the whole series. And I was thinking about stuff that you said in that episode, and I was like, oh my God. First of all, there's like two big problems with the book, and it's making it such a shallow, like little puddle of a book when it could be like a whole lake of a book. And so I figured out the two problems is one, there's no overarching conflict for the whole series. So the stakes for the first book feel really low, even though it ends on a cliffhanger, because it's just very obviously a part of a series. It's really not a standalone. I really can't make it a standalone. Right. And so then I was like, great, now I've identified the problem. Now I have to figure out what a good conflict that will support the themes that I'm doing. I can carry through each of the books so that in each book I can build upon the overall theme. So then I had to establish my overall theme. And then I basically had to like look into my magic system more and decide what I was going to represent with the magic system so I could support the theme more, because I'm making statements about stuff because I have something to say. And of course, when you put it into the narrative of a story, then people are more receptive. I'm not trying to like trick anybody. But I didn't even realize that this was stuff that like I basically like set up the conflict and I like wrote out like the big conflict for each book in the series. I think it's going to be 4 books now, which I didn't know before. And I know the overarching conflict and I know the conflict in each one. And just naturally, I suddenly realized that the theme in each book and the building theme throughout the series is this thing I've been thinking about a lot. And it just naturally wove its way into the story. And so now that I have that like identified, now I was like, okay, now I can like make everything feel seamless. Like it fits together the way it's supposed to, because now I've got this theme and it's the glue that I needed for all of the pieces to fit together the right way. And if nobody gets what I'm trying to say, then they don't, and I don't care, because it'll still be a really great story. So anyway, so I figured that out. So my lack of conflict was one, because it was of overarching conflict for the series. Same with my lack of like theme for the whole series. Solved those. And then some of the characters were like, they just weren't quite deep enough to be consistent. Like there wasn't enough to them. Like I didn't have them defined well enough in my head to know what they would or wouldn't do really. So they just felt kind of.
That's always my problem. I get it.
That's rarely my problem, but I had that. They felt flat. They felt totally two-dimensional. And so I basically figured out which characters were the problem. And I completely rewrote in my head, like their whole personas, their characters, their belief systems, their motivations. I made them way more complicated. I gave both of them like, also they both basically only had flaws before, like only cons, only bad stuff. So I gave each of them like more good stuff mixed in too. They're still bad, but I gave them enough good stuff to make them realistic, because nobody is just good or bad. So I feel like that alone made a big difference. But anyway, so
cool.
I'm so excited. I've rewritten like the first like 30 pages. And it's really good, I think. I mean, comparatively, like I had already re-edited a little bit of the first chapter, and I think it's really good. And then I did the first 30 pages and it's good, but now I have to write in a whole scene that wasn't there before. So I got to figure out what scene I'm going to use, because I want to use it as kind of like start like dropping hints and foreshadowing about the overall conflict. But I got to figure out what a good scenario, like what a scene that's also relevant to the plot of this book will be to stick in there. So now that's my big challenge. But after I get that, then I think I already have all the content I need. I think I just have to like continue rewriting, but I have this gap now. So that's my next challenge.
Oh my gosh. I love it. As you're describing this, like that's kind of what happened with my series at one point. And I'm like, gosh, everything coming together is just the best feeling like of all time. It's just, you're like, and then this will fit into this, and then this will make more sense, and this fits together. And just, I love it.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Cool.
It's great. I basically like kind of like figured out where all the holes in my story were by like writing out the plot, like a summary of what happens in the first book, and then a summary of what I think happens for the whole series. And every time that I faltered and I went like, what happens? Or I went, well, how do they do that? I put like a big like line like on the page. So I'd be like, so I know to go back and be like, okay, so I know this is going to happen, but I don't know how they make that happen. And unless I know that, then I can't foreshadow anything. I can't build up to anything if I don't know what's going to happen. So that was super helpful. I've never done that before, but largely thanks to you. So thank you, my Lewis.
Well, I'm so glad I helped. If nothing else, this podcast has helped you. So I'm fulfilled. It has. That's good.
It's true. It's very true. I genuinely wouuld get anything done, I feel like, writing wise, without this podcast. It keeps me motivated when everything in the world wants to distract me. So
good. I feel like this is another good example of why giving your work time is a really good idea. Because I feel like most first drafts are just going to have the problems you just talked about, unless you're like a really diligent planner. I just think that's natural. And so if you take the time, I think those answers kind of come to you. And when you like the statement that you need a book arc and a series arc is not complicated, but just hearing it stated that way, I think sometimes clicks for people. So you can be like, oh yeah, that's what I need to do. And so it's very simple stuff that time will help fix.
I agree. And shout out to like all things working for the good, because basically I wouldn't have even looked back at this book and discovered like, hey, there's still some really good stuff here. I don't want to give it up entirely, except that Javi had some trouble at work and it made me feel scared about our, being able to pay our bills type thing. And so then I, in fear, went to Upwork and I started picking up some more editing jobs, because that's what I do when I panic. And I was editing this girl's query letter, because I actually love to work on other people's query letters because it's really fun and not hard. Much harder to do mine. But basically, so I pulled up a template. I pulled up my old query letter for that book I'm talking about. I pulled it up to use as a template for working on hers. And then I was rereading it. I was like, I haven't opened that in a while. I guess maybe I'll open it, because I do like the concept. And then I reread the first chapter and was like, okay, I don't want to give it up. But none of that would have happened. This chain of events truly would not have happened if this scary thing hadn't happened with Javi's job. So really, you never know.
It works out.
Scary things and bad things sometimes have to happen to get you to the point where something really, really good can happen. So that's just, I don't want to forget that this time, because I went, like anxiety mode. And if I hadn't, then I probably wouldn't have, all ended up here. But in the future, I'd like to be a little more chill and be like, okay, things might just be working out for the good right now. And I just can't see it yet. I'm just too close, and someday this will make sense. And so I'm hoping this is one of those situations.
Yeah, this is a really like shallow example compared to that, but it's kind of like I always get really anxious when I have to drive somewhere new, so I over plan, and it's always really vindicating when I get there and I'm like, yeah, I definitely would have gotten lost if I hadn't over planned for this. So it's like the fact that I was anxious about it was a good thing, because it made me more prepared. So it's kind of like, except in a bigger life mode.
Yeah, exactly. I think maybe just like trying to like reframe the anxiety as like excitement, maybe, because I know like the chemicals are kind of similar for that, like what's going on inside. So I don't know if that helps, or not that you can't be upset about stressful things, because you can, but maybe just about like not catastrophizing, like be anxious, but no, it's okay. Like things are going to turn out okay. This actually might even be for the best in a way I completely can't predict. Like I definitely wouldn't have predicted editing somebody's query letter was going to make me basically, by a chain of events, solve every big problem with not only my book, but the whole series, to the point where I truly feel like this could be one of the best things that I write.
Yep.
Just never, ever would have thought that. So
Love it. That is also interesting because this is the one that you got like people read the full, right?
Yeah, I
They
had a
wanted to
few
read.
requests for the full manuscript, and I had like a lot of requests for partials. Like I really had a
Yeah.
lot of interest in this one, which is
Well, and
hard
so
to
it's like
get.
maybe the problem, so to speak, was that it didn't have that kind of theme or whatever. So now, I guess I'm just saying that like it's a good thing maybe they didn't offer it at that point because
Yeah,
now you have all this stuff worked out and it's going to be a better book, even though
exactly.
that's
It wouldn't have
it really
been,
sucks at the time. But
yeah, but it would have been like a shallow puddle of the book that it could be. So hopefully
right.
now I have this, like, I'm hoping by the end of this, it'll be like this like deep lake of a story with
Yeah.
like big themes and big conflict, but it all makes sense and it's all
Mhm.
consistent. And if somebody gets something out of my book, like thematically, great. If not, I feel like I've delivered a really strong story and a really healthy, vibrant escape. So I feel like either
Yeah.
way, if I can pull this off the way that I'm envisioning now, I'll have succeeded in those goals.
Exactly. That's why adding a
Yeah,
theme is so important because having the theme makes the plot and the characters better anyway. So even
it
the people
does.
that are reading it on the shallow level are still getting a better story.
It's true because until I figured out the theme, which was kind of a part of the overall conflict, because once you figure out your like overarching conflict, if you're in a series or if you're just doing a one book, like your overarching conflict, and then you have to then you figure out why that is so important to you specifically.
Mhm.
Basically, you have your theme. Like that's what happened to
Yeah.
me. I was like, I'm picking this conflict. Why? Oh, I know why. And then had the theme, and then I could work those down to like different little sub themes, and all those sub themes are illustrated in the way that the world works and the way the characters
Right.
interact. And so it just gives so much like depth and so much like guidance. It was like a roadmap for this
Yeah.
book that was fine before, but was kind of like meandering off on different trails. It didn't really have like a direct road. Now it
Mhm.
has one, and you can
Right.
totally tell. I feel like even if I were to like give somebody like a verbal summary of the story now, it would just be so much more compelling and make so much more
Mhm.
sense than it would have like a month ago.
Right. Oh, yay. I love
Yeah,
it.
that's good
Yay.
stuff. So that's my big long writing update, but I'm excited,
That's
guys.
cool.
I've only put like pen to paper, so to speak, a little bit, but because it's been mostly brainstorming. But also,
Mhm.
this is don't pressure yourself to sit down and write if you don't know what you're going to write. Like, do the
Mhm.
brainstorming, journal if you want to, but also just do thinking. Because I just did thinking for like a week or a week and a half because I was like, I can't write unless I figure out the conflict. I
Yep.
wasn't even trying to look for a theme because I hadn't thought about it. I was just like, I
Mhm.
need the overarching conflict so
Yeah.
bad. And then I figured it out and then immediately highlighted my theme because
Mhm.
that's what was important to me. So that's, I guess, what my subconscious was like, this conflict will represent that.
Exactly.
So
Gosh, the number of times I have been in the middle of writing and then just paused and been like, huh, this is the theme of this book. Didn't realize it. Now it's come to me. Interesting.
yeah,
And then just kept on going. It's just
yeah,
like every book that always happens.
exactly. That's what happened. I mean, and that's part of why, people who are creators, like it's important, I think, for your mental health to create, because
Mhm.
part of like you processing your emotions and even like what you believe is like you do so much of that in the creation process, like figuring out the conflict and then the theme and how I'm going to illustrate that, like really solidified for me some things that I think and believe about the world in a way
Mhm.
that like I kind of like in a fuzzy way knew I can maybe
Right.
talk about a little bit, but then I was like, no, this is what I believe and this is why. And I think that it makes sense. And not that
Yep.
I'll never have my mind changed, but it just, just helps you like kind of like realize where you are and what you're thinking and why. And it's just good. It's just like in such like a weird roundabout way that I wouldn't have gotten to if I was going to try and
Mhm.
sit down and like do like a like mental therapy journaling, which is also good,
Right.
but doesn't do the same thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yay. That's awesome.
Hooray.
Yay.
Hooray for the human mind and creation.
Woo.
So anything else that we want to say to peeps?
I don't think so.
Alrighty. Well, if you guys want to keep up with us during the week, if you want to share your own writing successes and struggles with us, you certainly can. You can follow us and you can message us on social media. We're on TikTok and we are on Instagram. We are the Scripturian Society. If you want to support the pod, you can totally do so. We would love it, but no pressure. You could do so at Patreon, which we are Story Siren Studio on there. That's our production company. There's also a free writing group on there. which no one has taken us up on yet. So don't look lost if you're there. It's just that you're the first one there.
Yeah.
And that's free. So you can just start commenting away at whatever it is you have to say about writing. Go for it. And like we said, free to join, because I believe that writers groups should be free. You could also support the pod there if you want. You can also go to storysirenstudio.com, and we have some really cool merch. If you want to just rep us, go for it. We're all in this together, at the risk of sounding like a High School Musical song.
At the risk of, or the benefit of.
The benefit of. I was just saying, I'm really not afraid of it.
Yeah.
Sounding like a High School Musical song. So go check that stuff out. It's all good. TikTok, you can definitely go to for all the funny writery content, because that is all Karissa's videos. They're all very funny. So check it out. Keep up with this. If there's something that you guys want us to cover on an episode, you can reach out, DM us, or email us at contact@storysirenstudio.com. If you like the podcast, you guys can rate us down below. If you can subscribe on whatever platform you're on, go for it. If you can't, we'll be here next week. We're here every week, same time, same place.
Yep.
I think that's everything we've got for you guys. So until then, keep writing.
And we'll see you on the next page.